Subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab. Now let's begin. The fluorescent lights of Westbrook Elementary felt too bright, too clinical, as Greg James sat in the principal's office. His palms were damp against the armrests of the uncomfortable plastic chair, the kind designed for children half his size. At 38, Greg had built a career making others uncomfortable. As the host of Cold Trail, one of the most downloaded true crime podcasts in the country, he'd spent years exposing predators, murderers, and con artists to millions of listeners. Now, sitting across from Principal Kathy Chapman, he felt exposed. "Mr. James, thank you for coming on such short notice," Principal Chapman said, her reading glasses perched at the end of her nose. She was a severe woman in her 50s, the kind who'd seen too many troubled children to be shocked by much. But something in her expression told Greg this wasn't a routine parent-teacher conference. "Your message said it was urgent. Is Lily okay?" "Physically, yes." Chapman turned her monitor toward him. "But I need you to look at this footage from yesterday morning." The grainy security video showed the school's main entrance. Children streamed through in their colorful backpacks, parents waving goodbye. Then Greg spotted his daughter, 7-year-old Lily, with her unmistakable red curls, the same shade as her late mother's. But she wasn't alone. A boy walked beside her, maybe 8 or 9 years old, with dark hair and pale skin. He held Lily's hand with casual familiarity, leaning down to whisper something that made her giggle. They moved together like siblings who'd known each other their whole lives. Greg's blood went cold. "Who is that?" His voice came out sharper than intended. "That's what we were hoping you could tell us, Mr. James. He's been accompanying Lily to school for the past 3 weeks. Our teachers assumed he was a family member, perhaps a cousin or stepbrother from a blended family situation. I don't have a stepson. I'm not even dating anyone." Greg leaned closer to the screen, studying the boy's face. There was something unsettling about his smile, too knowing, too adult. "Where is Lily now?" "In the counselor's office. I had Mrs. French bring her there when I realized you might not know this child." Greg was already on his feet. His mind raced through possibilities, each more disturbing than the last. His work had made him enemies, people who'd lost jobs, reputations, freedom because of his investigations. He'd received threats before, but this was different. This was intimate. The counselor's office was painted in soft pastels, filled with stuffed animals and children's drawings. Lily sat on a beanbag chair, clutching a worn teddy bear, the one Greg's wife Sarah had given her before the accident 3 years ago. Melva French, the school counselor, stood nearby with a practiced calm that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Daddy!" Lily jumped up and ran to him. Greg swept her into his arms, holding her tight, smelling her strawberry shampoo. "Hey, sweetheart, I missed you." He pulled back, studying her face for any sign of distress. She looked fine, happy even. That somehow made it worse. "Lily, the principal showed me some pictures of you coming to school. There was a boy with you." Lily's face brightened. "That's Tommy, my brother. He lives with us." The words hit Greg like a physical blow. He forced his voice to stay steady. "Honey, you don't have a brother." "Yes, I do." Lily spoke with the unshakable certainty only children possess. "Tommy says you just forgot about him because you're so busy with work. But it's okay. He forgives you." Greg exchanged a look with Mrs. French, who gave an almost imperceptible shake of her head. She'd gotten no further. "Where did you meet Tommy?" Lily scrunched her face, thinking. "He was always there. At the park, at the grocery store, outside my window at night. He said he was waiting for the right time to come home." Outside her window, Greg's house was a 2-story Craftsman. Lily's bedroom was on the 2nd floor. "Has Tommy been inside our house?" "Of course, Daddy. He has his own room in the basement. You just never go down there anymore." Greg didn't have a finished basement, just a damp storage space filled with old boxes and the lingering ghosts of his marriage. The thought of anything, down that made his skin crawl. Lily tugged at his sleeve, pulling his attention back. Her expression had shifted, becoming serious in a way that looked wrong on her young face. "Tommy told me to give you a message," she said. "He says it's your turn tonight, Daddy." "My turn for what?" Instead of answering, Lily reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was slightly crumpled, the kind of notebook paper found in any elementary classroom. She pressed it into his palm. He said you'd understand. Greg unfolded the note with trembling fingers. The handwriting was neat, almost elegant, definitely not a child's. 5 words were written in the center of the page. Do you remember Eldon Ball? The room seemed to tilt. Greg grabbed the edge of the counselor's desk to steady himself. Eldon Ball, a name he hadn't spoken in 6 years. A name connected to the darkest chapter of his career, and the secret he'd buried so deep he'd almost convinced himself it never happened. Mr. James? Mrs. French's voice seemed to come from very far away. Are you all right? What does the note say? Principal Chapman had followed them in. She looked over his shoulder and read the message. Her brow furrowed. Who's Eldon Ball? Before Greg could formulate a lie, Lily spoke up in that eerily calm voice. Tommy says Eldon Ball was the beginning, and Daddy's going to be the end. Chapman's hand was already reaching for her phone. I'm calling the police. Detective Shane Werner had the tired eyes of a man who'd seen too much and the sharp mind to remember all of it. He sat across from Greg in the police station's interview room, a cup of cold coffee between them, studying the note like it might reveal its secrets through sheer force of will. So let me get this straight, Werner said. You're a true crime podcaster. You've received threats before. But this name, Eldon Ball, that's different. Greg had already decided to tell a partial truth. The full story was too dangerous, too damning. Eldon Ball was a person of interest in a case I covered 6 years ago. The Meadowbrook situation. Werner's eyebrows rose. The cult compound? I remember that. FBI raid, multiple arrests, some kind of sex trafficking operation. That's the one. My podcast helped bring attention to what was happening there. Several high-ranking members went to prison. And this Ball guy, he was a mid-level member. Recruitment specialist. Greg chose his words carefully. He was never arrested. Disappeared before the raid. You think he's behind this? Some kind of revenge. I don't know. But someone wants me to think about him. Someone who's been getting close to my daughter for weeks without me knowing. Werner leaned back in his chair. The school's reviewing all their footage. We'll get a clearer image of this Tommy kid and run it through our systems. Could be a child actor someone hired. Could be someone's actual son being used as a prop. Either way, we'll find him. And in the meantime, I'd recommend staying somewhere else tonight. You mentioned you have a basement you don't use? We'll have officers check it out, but if someone's been entering your home without your knowledge, it's not safe. Greg nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. Eldon Ball hadn't just disappeared before the raid. Greg knew exactly what had happened to him. And if whoever was behind this knew the truth, then everything, his career, his freedom, his life, was about to come crashing down. That night, Greg sat in a nondescript hotel room with Lily asleep in the adjoining bed, his laptop open to files he hadn't touched in years. The Meadowbrook investigation had been his big break, the story that transformed Cold Trail from a hobby into a phenomenon. Millions had listened as he'd exposed the compound's leader, a charismatic sociopath named Hippolito Copeland, and his network of predators. But the files on his screen told a different story, the one he'd never aired. Eldon Ball had been Copeland's right hand, responsible for luring vulnerable families into the fold. He'd had a gift for finding desperate people, single mothers, troubled teenagers, lonely widowers, and offering them the one thing they crave, belonging. By the time they realized the truth, escape felt impossible. Greg had tracked Ball down 6 years ago, hoping to convince him to become a source. What happened instead had changed everything. A knock at the hotel room door jolted him from his thoughts. He checked the peephole, Detective Werner, looking grim. We searched your basement, Werner said as Greg let him in. Found something you need to see. He handed over an evidence bag. Inside was a Polaroid photograph. Lily sleeping in her bed, the image taken from inside her room. Written on the white border in that same elegant handwriting. Night 1 of 21. There were 20 more photos, Werner continued. One for each night. Whoever's doing this has been in your house while your daughter slept. While you slept. For 3 weeks. Greg's hands shook as he studied the image. In the background, barely visible, was a shadow in the corner of the room. A shape that might have been a person. We also found this. Werner held up another bag. A USB drive. Haven't looked at it yet. Thought you might want to be present when we do. Play it. Werner plugged the drive into Greg's laptop. A video file appeared. No title, just a date from 6 years ago. The detective hit play. The footage was dark, grainy, but unmistakable. It showed a cabin in the woods. 2 figures struggling. And then, one of them falling and not getting up. Greg's own voice echoed from the speakers. Oh God. Oh God, what did I do? Werner paused the video. His expression had hardened into something unreadable. Mr. James, he said slowly, is there something you want to tell me? The interrogation room felt smaller the second time. Greg had been here for 3 hours now, telling a story he'd sworn would die with him. Detective Werner listened with the patient intensity of a man who'd heard countless confessions, while his partner, a younger detective named Alex Frazier, took notes in a leather-bound book. So let me understand, Werner said. 6 years ago, you confronted Eldon Ball at his cabin to get information for your podcast. He attacked you. You fought back. He fell, hit his head on a rock, and died. Yes. And instead of calling the police, you buried the body and deleted any evidence of ever being there. He was a predator, Greg said, knowing how weak it sounded. He'd helped traffic dozens of children. No one would have believed it was self-defense, not with my podcast making me look like a vigilante. And I was right about to bring down the entire compound. If I'd been arrested, the story would have died, Werner finished. And all those other victims would never have gotten justice. I'm not proud of what I did, but I'd do it again. Werner exchanged a glance with Frazier. Here's the problem, Mr. James. The video we recovered? It was edited, cut to show only the incriminating parts. No context for the fight. No evidence of self-defense. Someone's been sitting on this footage for 6 years, waiting for the right moment to use it. And now they're using it to terrorize my daughter. Which brings us back to our original question. Who knew what really happened to Eldon Ball? Greg had been asking himself the same thing since the video played. Only 3 people had known he was going to that cabin. Himself, his now-deceased wife Sarah, and his producer at the time, a man named Jared McKinney. There's a security camera, Greg said slowly, the realization dawning. Ball had one hidden outside his cabin. I found it afterward and destroyed it, or thought I did. But there must have been a backup feed going somewhere else. Eldon Ball had family, a brother. The memory surfaced like something dead floating to the top of dark water. Irving Ball, younger, stayed out of the cult business. I did a background check on him back then, but he seemed clean. Worked as an accountant in some suburb. Had a family of his own. Had a family? His wife left him around the same time Meadowbrook fell apart. Took their kids. I never followed up on what happened to him after that. Greg felt the pieces clicking together. If Irving Ball has been watching me this whole time, planning this, then we need to find him before his plan reaches whatever endgame he's designed. Werner stood. I'm going to assign officers to your hotel. We'll dig into Irving Ball's current whereabouts. In the meantime, I'd suggest you start making a list of everyone who might have a grudge, even a small one. After Werner left, Greg sat alone with the weight of his past pressing down on him. He'd thought he'd buried Eldon Ball in every sense that mattered. Now the grave was opening, and something far worse than guilt was crawling out. The next morning, Greg drove to a coffee shop on the outskirts of town to meet Jared McKinney. His former producer had gained weight and lost hair in the years since they'd worked together, but his eyes still held that sharp, opportunistic gleam that had made him such an effective partner in the early days. Greg James, Jared said, sliding into the booth across from him. The man who forgot all about his old friends once he hit the big time. I didn't forget you, Jared. I fired you. Semantics. Jared flagged down a waitress and ordered black coffee. You said it was urgent. Something to do with Meadowbrook. Greg slid his phone across the table, showing the photo of Lily with the mysterious Tommy. Recognize this boy? Jared squinted at the image, then shook his head. Should I? Someone's been using him to get close to my daughter. They've been in my house while we slept, taking pictures, leaving messages. And they know about Eldon Ball. The color drained from Jared's face. Whatever he'd expected, it wasn't this. That's impossible. No one knows about that except us and Sarah. And Sarah's dead. Greg leaned forward. Ball had a hidden camera outside his cabin. Someone recovered the footage. Now, they're using it against me. Jared was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I've been getting things too. I thought I was going crazy, so I didn't tell anyone. What kind of things? Photos. Of my kids at school, my wife at the grocery store. No messages, no demands. Just proof that someone's watching. Jared's hands were trembling. Greg, if this is Irving Ball, you knew he existed? Of course I knew. I researched the whole Ball family when we were investigating Eldon. Irving was always the wild card. Too smart to get involved in his brother's business, but too loyal to turn him in. When Eldon disappeared, Irving filed missing persons reports, hired private investigators, even showed up at one of your live shows demanding answers. Greg remembered now. A man in the audience, standing up during a Q&A, shouting about his brother before security removed him. He dismissed it as a conspiracy theorist, a crazy person, just another face in the crowd of people he'd pissed off over the years. Why didn't you tell me? Because you'd already made it clear you wanted to forget the whole thing. Moved on to bigger cases, bigger audiences. I figured if Irving Ball wanted to cause trouble, he would have done it by now. He was waiting. Greg understood now. He wanted me comfortable, successful. He wanted me to have something worth losing before he took it all away. Greg spent the next 2 days building a profile of Irving Ball with the help of a private investigator named Brett Blake, a former FBI agent who'd appeared as a guest on Cold Trail several times. Brett was expensive but thorough, and more importantly, he knew when to not ask questions. The picture that emerged was disturbing. After his wife, Savannah, left him, Irving Ball had reinvented himself completely. He'd changed his name to Erwin Barker, moved 3 states away, and built a new life as a child psychologist specializing in family trauma. His client list included schools, family courts, and Greg felt his stomach drop, a summer camp Lily had attended 2 years ago. He's been positioning himself, Brett explained over a secure video call, building access to families, to children, to you specifically. The camp connection means he's probably had eyes on your daughter for years. And the boy, Tommy, that's where it gets complicated. Erwin, legally adopted a son 3 years ago. A boy named Thomas who'd been in foster care since infancy. On paper, the adoption looks completely legitimate. He adopted a child to use as a weapon against me. It's possible. Or it's possible he genuinely wanted to be a father and saw an opportunity to serve dual purposes. Either way, Thomas Barker has been homeschooled since the adoption. No records of him attending any regular school. Limited social interaction outside his father's control. Greg thought about the boy in the security footage, the too knowing smile, the way he'd held Lily's hand like they were old friends. What had Irving been telling this child? What lies had he fed him about the man who killed his uncle? I need to find Irving's current address. Already done. Brett sent a file through the encrypted channel. He's renting a house about 40 minutes from yours. Been there for 8 months. 8 months. Plenty of time to study Greg's routines, to find the gaps in his security, to teach Tommy how to approach Lily. There's one more thing, Brett continued. Irving's been writing a book. Self-published. Only about 200 copies sold. Mostly to true crime forums. It's about Meadowbrook, but from a perspective of the families left behind. Chapter 12 is all about you. What does it say? That you killed his brother and covered it up. That you're a fraud who built an empire on lies. That one day, justice would come. Brett's expression was grim. He doesn't have proof, but he has theory. And apparently, he's been patient enough to wait for the right moment to get that proof. The book arrived at Greg's hotel the next day. No return address, just his name in that familiar, elegant handwriting. He read it cover to cover while Lily napped, feeling his carefully constructed world crumble with every page. Irving Ball had done his homework. The book traced every inconsistency in Greg's Meadowbrook coverage, every question left unanswered, every convenient coincidence. It stopped short of outright accusation, but anyone reading between the lines would understand the implication. The final chapter was titled The Game. What happens when a predator hunts a predator? What happens when justice fails and ordinary men must take extraordinary measures? This is not a book about revenge. This is a book about patience, about waiting, about making sure that when the time comes, the man who destroyed my family will experience exactly what he inflicted on others. He took my brother, so I will take his whole world. The rules are simple. 21 days, 21 tests, 21 chances for him to confess. If he admits the truth publicly before the game ends, I will surrender myself and my evidence to the authorities. If he refuses, then his daughter will learn exactly what kind of man her father really is. And then, piece by piece, I will dismantle everything he's ever built. The game begins when he reads this sentence. Greg closed the book. His reflection stared back at him from the dark hotel window. A man who'd spent years chasing monsters, never quite admitting that he'd become one himself. But Irving Ball had made one critical mistake. He'd assumed Greg would play by the rules. He'd assumed guilt would make him weak. He was wrong. Greg James had built his career on understanding criminals. How they thought, what they wanted, when their plans broke down. Irving Ball was methodical, patient, and smart, but he was also operating from a place of grief. And grief, Greg knew, made people sloppy. He called an emergency meeting in Brett Blake's office, bringing Detective Werner into the loop with a carefully edited version of events. The video evidence still hung over his head like a guillotine, but he decided that survival came first. Justice, whatever that meant now, could wait. Irving wants a confession, Greg explained, spreading the book's final pages across Brett's desk. He's given himself 21 days to break me. That means he's operating on a timeline, which means he's already planned everything. We need to get inside his head. Werner studied the pages skeptically. You're suggesting we let this play out? A man has been stalking your daughter, threatening your family. And if we move on him now, all we have is circumstantial evidence and a book that makes me look like a murderer. Irving's too careful to leave obvious traces. We need him to make a mistake. What kind of mistake? The kind he's already making. Greg pulled up the photos Brett had gathered. Images of Irving Barker's rental house, his car, his daily routine. He thinks I'm going to crumble under pressure. That's why he sent the book directly to me instead of the police. He wants to watch me suffer before the final blow. So you're proposing what exactly? I'm proposing we give him what he wants. Greg's voice was cold, controlled. The voice he used when interviewing killers. Let him think the game is working. Let him get comfortable. And while he's focused on me, we gather evidence on everything he's done. The stalking, the trespassing, the psychological abuse of his own adopted son. Brett nodded slowly. Turn his game into a trap. Exactly. Day 8 of Irving's game brought a new message. A drawing left in Lily's backpack depicting a stick figure lying face down with red crayon around his head. Tommy's work, clearly guided by an adult hand. Day 11 brought photographs of Greg's home. Exterior shots, each one marked with a number indicating how many potential entry points Irving had identified. Day 14 brought something worse. A voicemail on Greg's personal phone, clearly recorded without consent, of Lily talking about her brother and how Daddy's going to tell the truth soon. Through it all, Greg maintained the appearance of a man breaking down. He took leave from his podcast, citing family emergency. He made increasingly erratic posts on social media about stress and sleepless nights. He even checked into a therapist's office, one carefully selected because her waiting room had no security cameras and a back exit. What Irving didn't know was that Greg was using that exit to coordinate with Brett and Werner, building a case that would destroy his enemy more thoroughly than any public confession ever could. The breakthrough came on day 16 when Tommy Barker, the real Tommy, not the ghost who haunted Lily's stories, appeared on a playground near Greg's hotel. Greg watched from a distance as Lily spotted the boy and ran toward him with undisguised joy. The sight twisted something in his chest. Whatever Irving had done, Tommy was still just a child who'd been raised to participate in another man's vendetta. But children talk, and Brett's team had placed recording devices in every public space Tommy was likely to visit. Tommy told me a secret Lily reported that night, unaware she was being recorded. He said his daddy has a special room with pictures of you all over the walls. Like a shrine, Tommy said, but Tommy doesn't know what that word means. Did Tommy say anything else about his daddy's special room? He said there are computers there, and recordings. Tommy isn't allowed to go in, but sometimes he hears things through the door. Greg hugged his daughter tight, guilt and determination warring in his chest. "You're being so brave, sweetheart. And soon, I promise, everything is going to go back to normal." Brett Blake led the team that executed the warrant on Irving Barker's rental house on day 18. Greg wasn't allowed to be present. Conflict of interest, Warner explained, but he watched the body camera footage in real time from a surveillance van parked 3 blocks away. The special room Tommy had described was worse than anyone imagined. 3 walls covered floor to ceiling with photographs, documents, and red string connecting different elements of Greg's life like a conspiracy theorist's fever dream. A bank of computers holding terabytes of surveillance footage, not just of Greg, but of his ex-colleagues, his neighbors, even Jared McKinney's family. And in the center of it all, a detailed timeline. 21 days of planned psychological torture, culminating in what Irving had labeled the revelation, a scheduled upload of the Eldon Ball video to every major news outlet, carefully timed to destroy Greg's career and send him to prison. "We got him," Warner's voice crackled through the van's speakers. "Irving Barker, you're under arrest for stalking, criminal trespassing, child endangerment, and conspiracy to commit extortion." The officers found Irving in his bedroom, calmly packing a suitcase as if he'd known they were coming. He offered no resistance, simply smiling that patient smile Greg had seen echoed in so many of his book's pages. "You think this changes anything?" Irving said as they cuffed him. "The truth doesn't disappear because you destroy the messenger. Greg James killed my brother, and one day everyone will know it." "Your brother was a child trafficker," Warner replied. "And you spent 6 years psychologically abusing an adopted child to prosecute your vendetta. I think people will have opinions about that too." The arrest made national news within hours. Greg watched the coverage from his hotel room, Lily finally asleep in a bed that felt safe for the first time in weeks. The narrative was exactly what Brett had predicted. A disturbed man obsessed with a podcaster, using his own son as a weapon in an elaborate revenge scheme. Nobody mentioned Eldon Ball's death. The edited video had been seized as evidence and sealed by the court, part of an ongoing investigation into Irving's criminal activity, not Greg's. But Greg knew it wasn't over. The video still existed. Irving would talk eventually, desperate to share his truth with anyone who'd listen. The story would spread through conspiracy forums and true crime communities, a persistent whisper that could never be fully silenced, unless Greg silenced it himself. The interview aired 3 days later, a special episode of Cold Trail that Greg recorded from his home studio, looking directly into the camera with an expression of controlled anguish. "I need to tell you something I've never told anyone," he began. "Something that happened 6 years ago during the Meadowbrook investigation. Something I've carried alone because I was afraid of what it would mean if the truth came out." He told the story carefully, honestly, from the moment he'd tracked down Eldon Ball to the moment he'd buried the body in the woods behind the cabin. He didn't excuse his actions or minimize his guilt. He simply laid out the facts, the attack, the struggle, the fall, the panic that followed. "I should have called the police," he said. "I should have trusted the system to understand that I'd acted in self-defense. Instead, I made a choice based on fear, and that choice has haunted me ever since." The episode ended with Greg announcing a leave of absence from podcasting, effective immediately. He would be cooperating fully with law enforcement, accepting whatever consequences came from his confession. What the audience didn't see was Werner's reaction as he watched the recording from Greg's living room. "This is going to change everything," the detective said. "You realize that, right? Even if prosecutors decide not to charge you. And that's a big if, your career is over." Maybe. Greg looked at his daughter, playing quietly in the next room, finally free of the ghost named Tommy. "But Irving wanted to destroy me by exposing the truth. Now I've exposed it myself on my own terms. His whole game, the planning, the waiting, the elaborate revenge, it's meaningless. I took it away from him. That's your idea of winning. That's my idea of survival." Greg allowed himself a small, grim smile. "Irving spent 6 years building a trap. I just walked through it and out the other side. He wanted me to crumble under the weight of my secret. Instead, I threw it away before he could use it. The aftermath unfolded exactly as Greg had planned. Prosecutors reviewed the evidence and determined that while Greg's actions had been illegal, the circumstances, Eldon Ball's documented history of predatory behavior, the clear evidence of a violent confrontation, Greg's immediate cooperation once the truth emerged, made prosecution unlikely to succeed. No charges were filed. Irving Barker was less fortunate. His obsessive surveillance, the psychological manipulation of his adopted son, the systematic stalking of multiple families, all of it combined into a case that drew national attention for its disturbing scope. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison with mandatory psychological evaluation and no possibility of parole for a decade. Tommy Barker was removed from Irving's custody and placed with a family recommended by the court, one that specialized in helping children recover from traumatic situations. Greg received updates, occasionally carefully worded reports that painted a picture of slow but genuine healing. 6 months later, Greg sat in his backyard watching Lily chase fireflies through the summer twilight. The podcast was over, not because his audience had abandoned him, but because he'd realized there were more important things than chasing other people's demons. He'd taken a job teaching investigative journalism at a local college. The pay was less, the prestige non-existent, but he got to pick Lily up from school every day at 3. He got to help her with homework and read her bedtime stories. He got to be the father she deserved instead of the ghost who'd been too busy exposing monsters to notice, one closing in on his own family. The doorbell rang. Lily looked up from her fireflies, curiosity bright in her eyes. "Can I get it, Daddy?" "Let me." Greg walked through the house, past the kitchen where dinner simmered on the stove, past the living room where evidence of a normal life had finally accumulated, toys, books, a truly absurd number of houseplants. He opened the door to find a boy standing on his porch. Dark hair, pale skin, a face that had matured in the months since Greg had last seen it. Tommy Barker, Thomas, now, according to the reports, stood with his foster mother a few steps behind, watching carefully. "Mr. James?" Thomas's voice was uncertain, nothing like the knowing child who'd held Lily's hand in the security footage. "I wanted to say my foster mom said it was important to. I'm sorry for what my dad made me do. I didn't understand, not really. I thought it was a game. He said you were a bad man and we were going to make you sorry." Greg studied the boy for a long moment. He thought about Irving's elaborate revenge, about Eldon's crimes, about all the damage done in the name of justice, real and imagined. "Thomas," he said finally, "your dad was wrong about a lot of things. But he was right about one thing. I did make a terrible mistake a long time ago. I hurt people because I thought I was doing the right thing. I've spent a lot of time thinking about what that means and how to do better. So you're not angry? I'm not angry at you. I'm not sure I'm even angry at your dad anymore. Mostly I'm just tired." Greg stepped aside, opening the door wider. "Your foster mom's welcome to come in. We were just about to have dinner, and Lily's been asking about you." As if summoned by her name, Lily appeared at Greg's side. Her face lit up with recognition, not the artificial brightness Irving had engineered, but something genuine. Thomas, do you want to see my room? I got new glow stars on the ceiling, and they're way better than the ones I had before." Thomas looked at his foster mother, who nodded encouragingly. He looked at Greg, who stepped back to let him pass. And then, hesitantly, he stepped across the threshold into a house that had once been the target of his father's revenge, and found something waiting that Irving Ball could never have predicted. A second chance. Greg returned to his backyard after dinner, leaving the children to their worlds of glow stars and fireflies. The summer air was thick with the smell of honeysuckle, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked at shadows. He thought about Eldon Ball's body, still buried in the woods behind that cabin. He thought about Irving, locked away in his cell, his elaborate revenge transformed into a cautionary tale. He thought about Sarah, gone 3 years now, and what she would have said about all of this. "You're not a good man," she might have told him, "but you're trying to be better. And sometimes that's enough." The back door opened, and Lily ran to him, Thomas trailing uncertainly behind. They both collapsed onto the grass beside him, looking up at a sky just beginning to fill with stars. "Daddy." Lily's voice was drowsy, the way it got when she was fighting sleep. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm glad Thomas, came to visit. But I'm also glad he doesn't live in our basement anymore." Greg laughed. A real laugh, the first one in what felt like forever. "Me too, baby. Me too." The past would always be there, buried in the dark places he couldn't quite reach. But the present was here, warm and breathing and full of second chances. And for now, that was enough. The game was over. He had won. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Hello, and welcome to Infidelity Tales Lab. Your support means everything to us. We'd love to know, which geographical location are you joining from today? At home? On the go? Share with us below. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, Golden Promises. Bryce Harmon stood at the edge of the construction site, surveying what would soon become Axiom Tower, the jewel of Lakeshire's skyline. At 32, he'd built Harmon Construction from nothing into one of the region's most respected firms. The evening sun glinted off his engagement ring as he checked his watch. He was meeting Vanessa at Bellamy's in an hour to celebrate their 3rd anniversary. "Looking good, boss," called Miles Dennison, his foreman and oldest friend since their foster care days. "We're ahead of schedule." "Not good enough," Bryce replied with a half smile. "I promised Axiom we'd be done 2 weeks early." Miles shook his head. "Always pushing." "How's Vanessa handling the wedding preparations?" "She's in her element. Guest list is up to 300 now." Bryce ran his hand through his dark hair. "Her father finally warmed up to me. I think proving I could match their family fortune helped." The truth was more complicated. Douglas Reynolds, shipping magnate and Lakeshire's old money elite, had made no secret of his disdain for Bryce. A self-made man with questionable origins wasn't his idea of a suitable match for his daughter. But Vanessa had chosen Bryce, captivated by his rugged charm and relentless ambition. Their romance had been a whirlwind. Vanessa Reynolds, socialite, philanthropist, and the city's most eligible bachelorette, had literally crashed into his life when her Tesla collided with his truck at a stoplight. What began as an angry exchange of insurance information ended with dinner at Lakeshire's most exclusive restaurant. 6 months later, he proposed with a flawless 5-carat diamond. "Still can't believe you tamed Lakeshire's princess," Miles teased. "Though that crowd she runs with, especially that Wexler guy, they still look at you like you're the help." Bryce's jaw tightened. "Tristan Wexler is her childhood friend. Nothing more." "If you say so." Miles changed the subject. "How's the beach house coming?" "Finishing touches. It's Vanessa's wedding gift." Bryce hadn't told his fiancée about the oceanfront property he'd purchased and renovated. It represented everything: his success, their future, the family they would build together. As Bryce left the construction site, his phone chimed with a text from Vanessa, running late. "Charity meeting with Tristan. Meet at 8 instead. Love you." Bryce ignored the familiar twinge of unease and replied with a simple "see you then." Their wedding was 3 weeks away. Nothing could possibly go wrong now. Chapter 2, Shattered Reflection. Pain. Blinding, all-consuming pain. Bryce's consciousness flickered between darkness and harsh fluorescent lights. Frantic voices echoed around him. Multiple fractures, severe facial lacerations, 3rd-degree burns. The helicopter crash replayed in fragments. The client meeting at the mountain resort. The unexpected snowstorm. The pilot's strained voice announcing mechanical failure. The violent impact as they hit the mountainside. The searing heat of flames against his skin as he dragged the unconscious pilot from the wreckage before collapsing. 3 days later, Bryce awoke in the burn unit. Miles was there, his expression telling Bryce everything before the doctors explained. The right side of his face and body had sustained severe burns and lacerations. He'd undergone the first of what would be many reconstructive surgeries, but the doctors were clear. The scarring would be permanent and significant. "Vanessa?" Bryce asked, his voice barely a whisper. "She's been here," Miles answered, not meeting his eyes. She needed some air. When Vanessa finally visited, her reaction was worse than anything Bryce could have imagined. She flinched visibly at the sight of him, her perfect features contorting into poorly disguised repulsion. "They say you were heroic," she said, maintaining distance from his bed. "Saving the pilot like that. Where have you been?" Bryce asked, noticing the absence of her engagement ring. Tears welled in her eyes. "I've been trying, Bryce, but I can't. I just can't do this." "Do what?" His heart raced despite the medication. "The doctor showed me simulations of what you'll look like after all the surgeries. You'll still be disfigured." She looked away. "I can't walk down the aisle to, this isn't what I signed up for." The words hit harder than the helicopter crash. "Vanessa, it's still me." She finally met his gaze, her blue eyes cold. "You're too ugly for me now, Bryce." She placed the engagement ring on his bedside table. "We both know appearances matter in my world. No one will want you looking like this." As she turned to leave, Bryce glimpsed Tristan Wexler waiting in the hallway, his hand reaching for Vanessa's as soon as she exited. Through the haze of pain medication, something crystallized in Bryce's mind. This wasn't just about his scars. This betrayal had been brewing long before the crash. Chapter 3: Ashes and Embers. The next 18 months nearly destroyed Bryce. The physical pain of multiple surgeries paled compared to watching his life unravel. Harmon Construction hemorrhaged clients after his extended absence. The banks circled like vultures as projects fell behind. His life savings evaporated into medical bills not covered by insurance. The final blow came when Axiom Tower, his pride and joy, was reassigned to Wexler Development. That night, Miles found Bryce in his apartment, surrounded by empty whiskey bottles and newspaper clippings announcing Vanessa and Tristan's engagement. "You look like shit," Miles said bluntly, opening the curtains to let in sunlight for what seemed like the first time in months. "Did you know she was sleeping with him while we were engaged?" Bryce asked, his voice hollow. "I suspected." Miles sat across from him. "Everyone in Lakeshire is talking about their fairy tale romance. How they were always meant to be together." Bryce laughed bitterly. "They're calling it a blessing in disguise that the accident revealed her true feelings before we married." "Accident?" Miles frowned. "The helicopter crash. Mechanical failure," they said. Bryce pushed forward a folder he'd obtained from a private investigator. "Except it wasn't. Someone tampered with the fuel line." Miles flipped through the photos, his expression darkening. "You think Wexler arranged it? I think he wanted me out of the way. Dead would have been convenient. Disfigured was an acceptable alternative." Bryce stood, steadier than he'd been in months. "The crash was meant to eliminate me. Instead, it revealed who my enemies are." That night, after Miles left, Bryce stood before the mirror, truly examining his scars for the first time. The right side of his face was a landscape of ridged tissue and grafted skin. His once handsome features were now a stark contrast of before and after. "No one will want you," Vanessa's words echoed. Bryce's fist crashed into the mirror, shattering his reflection into 1,000 pieces. As blood dripped from his knuckles, something awakened within him, a cold, calculated resolve. He would rebuild himself, his body, his fortune, his power, and when he had everything, he would take from them what they valued most. Not with the quick vengeance of a wounded animal, but with the patient, methodical destruction of a predator who knows exactly when to strike. Chapter 4: Phoenix Strategy. 3 years after the crash, Bryce Harmon had vanished from Lakeshire's social consciousness. In his place emerged B.R. Harmon, founder of Phoenix Ventures, a shadowy investment firm operating from Seattle. Few connected the reclusive financier to the failed construction company owner. Bryce preferred it that way. The extensive reconstructive surgeries had restored functionality, but left him with a distinctive appearance. He'd grown a precisely trimmed beard to cover the worst scars and adopted custom-tailored suits that exuded power and commanded respect. His transformation began with Vivian Mercer, a venture capitalist who'd seen something in Bryce when she visited him in physical therapy. "You've got the hunger," she'd said, "the kind that comes only after you've lost everything." Under Vivian's mentorship, Bryce leveraged his intimate knowledge of construction and real estate combined with an almost supernatural ability to predict market trends. Phoenix Ventures specialized in rescuing failing projects, turning them profitable with ruthless efficiency. Miles remained his only connection to his former life, now serving as Phoenix's chief operating officer. Together, they built an empire in the shadows, with one purpose driving every acquisition: positioning Bryce to return to Lakeshire at the perfect moment. The Reynolds-Wexler wedding announcement is everywhere. Miles mentioned during their weekly strategy meeting, sliding a society page across the desk. Bryce glanced at the photo of Vanessa in Tristan's arms, her smile radiant as she showed off her enormous diamond ring. 4 years of engagement. Interesting, they're only now setting a date. Wexler Development is struggling, Miles explained. The Axiom Tower is behind schedule and over budget. Word is Douglas Reynolds finally issued an ultimatum: finish the tower and marry his daughter, or lose both. Bryce leaned back in his chair, satisfaction curling his lips. What's the status of Horizon Partners? They're desperate. The pandemic crushed their liquidity. They'll accept our offer. Horizon Partners owned 30% of Wexler Development's debt that would soon belong to Phoenix Ventures. And the other matter? Miles handed him another folder. Found him. The helicopter mechanic. He left the country after the crash, but he's back now. Inside was surveillance footage of a man drinking alone in a dive bar. Antonio Diaz, the maintenance worker who'd been paid to sabotage Bryce's helicopter. Arrange a meeting, Bryce said quietly. It's time he told us who hired him. 3 nights later, a terrified Diaz confirmed what Bryce had suspected. Tristan Wexler had paid him $50,000 to ensure the helicopter would experience catastrophic mechanical failure. What Wexler hadn't counted on was Bryce's determination to survive. With Diaz's signed confession secured, Bryce made his final preparations. Phoenix Ventures acquired the small but respected Lakeshire Financial Chronicle, and Bryce selected the perfect property to serve as both his residence and the new Phoenix headquarters, a towering penthouse overlooking Axiom Tower. Are you sure about this timeline? Miles asked as they finalized the details. Once we make these moves, there's no turning back. Bryce stared out at the Seattle skyline one last time. I've waited 4 years. It's time Lakeshire remember my name. Chapter 5. Calculated Ascension. Bryce's return to Lakeshire was meticulously orchestrated. Phoenix Ventures announced its relocation with the purchase of the Hammond Building, a historic landmark directly across from Axiom Tower. The local business community buzzed with speculation about the mysterious B.R. Harmon, who had amassed a fortune seemingly overnight. Vivian Mercer arranged Bryce's first public appearance at the annual Chamber of Commerce Gala, an event certain to include the Reynolds and Wexler families. Remember, Vivian cautioned as they entered the ballroom, your goal tonight isn't revenge. It's establishing dominance. The room quieted as they entered. Bryce, now 37, carried himself with the magnetic confidence of a predator. The scars visible above his beard only added to his mystique. His custom Brioni suit and the intensity of his gaze drew attention from everyone, particularly Vanessa Reynolds. She stood across the room beside Tristan, her expression shifting from curiosity to shock as recognition slowly dawned. The champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor. Looks like your ex-fiancée remembers you, Vivian murmured. She's not important tonight, Bryce replied, though he noted with satisfaction how Vanessa whispered urgently to Tristan, whose face drained of color. Douglas Reynolds approached first, business instincts overriding social awkwardness. Mr. Harmon, we're honored to have Phoenix Ventures in Lakeshire. I don't believe we've formally met. Actually, we have, Bryce replied, his voice deeper and more commanding than in his previous life. I was once engaged to your daughter. Reynolds paled. Bryce? We thought you'd left Lakeshire. I did. Now I'm back. Bryce scanned the room, noting the whispers spreading like wildfire. Phoenix Ventures has significant plans for this city. Throughout the evening, Bryce navigated the social battlefield with precision. He announced Phoenix's first Lakeshire project, a $300 million development that would employ local workers, specifically those laid off when Wexler Development downsized. He watched Tristan seethe from across the room, unable to confront the man who was simultaneously his greatest nightmare and his potential financial savior. Horizon Partners had made it known that Phoenix now held significant leverage over Wexler Development. The next morning, the Lakeshire Financial Chronicle's front page featured Bryce's photograph under the headline, "Phoenix Rises. Mysterious Billionaire Returns to Transform Lakeshire." Within weeks, Bryce had systematically infiltrated every aspect of Lakeshire's business community. He donated $20 million to the hospital that had treated his burns, establishing the Harmon Center for Reconstructive Surgery. He purchased the land surrounding Wexler's flagship development, effectively controlling access to utilities and transportation. When Axiom Corporation expressed concerns about Wexler Development's delays, Bryce was there with solutions and alternatives. His revenge wasn't just personal, it was comprehensive. "Vanessa's been asking about you," Miles reported during their daily briefing. "She's reached out to mutual acquaintances, trying to arrange an accidental meeting." Bryce smiled coldly. "Make sure she gets nowhere near me. And Wexler, he'll come to us soon enough. He has no choice." Bryce examined the latest financial reports. "How are we positioned for the market correction?" "Perfectly. When it hits, we'll be able to acquire everything on our list, including controlling interest in Reynolds Shipping." The economic downturn struck 2 months later, precisely when Bryce had predicted. As businesses throughout Lakeshire struggled, Phoenix Ventures thrived, strategically acquiring competitors and suppliers until Bryce controlled a business ecosystem that quietly strangled Wexler Development's operations. The Lakeshire Financial Chronicle, now firmly under Bryce's editorial direction, ran a cover story featuring his full-page photograph, "Visionary Leader: How B.R. Harmon Became Lakeshire's First Billionaire." That evening, Bryce's phone registered the first of what would become hundreds of calls for Vanessa Reynolds. He let it ring unanswered. Chapter 6: Perfect Positioning. The market correction Bryce engineered devastated Wexler Development. Tristan's company, already struggling with the over-budget Axiom Tower, now faced bankruptcy. The Reynolds-Wexler wedding was postponed indefinitely as Tristan scrambled to save his family's legacy. Bryce watched from his penthouse as workers removed the Wexler Development logo from the Axiom Tower construction site. Phoenix Ventures had acquired the project through a web of shell companies, ensuring neither Tristan nor Douglas Reynolds knew who had delivered the killing blow. "Wexler's requesting a meeting," Miles announced, entering Bryce's office with a satisfied grin. "Says he has a proposal that could benefit both parties." "Schedule it for Friday," Bryce replied. "Let him stew a few more days." "And Vanessa?" "That's her 218th voicemail since the magazine cover." Miles held up Bryce's phone with its notification of missed calls. "Have you analyzed the messages?" "As you requested. First 20 were shock and questions. Next 50 were reminiscing about good times. After that, increasingly desperate appeals about how she never stopped loving you and made a terrible mistake." Miles grimaced. "Latest ones suggest she's willing to leave Wexler if you'll just speak with her." Bryce's expression remained impassive. "Keep monitoring. Don't respond." His revenge required perfect timing. Every day Vanessa's calls went unanswered increased her desperation. Every hour Tristan waited for a meeting diminished his leverage. Meanwhile, Bryce continued his public ascension. He established the Phoenix Foundation, focusing on burn survivors and children from foster care. His carefully cultivated public image was that of a scarred yet compassionate titan of industry, a man who had overcome personal tragedy to build an empire. Few connected these philanthropic efforts with systematic destruction of the Reynolds-Wexler business interests. By the time Douglas Reynolds realized his shipping company was being strangled by Phoenix-controlled ports and logistics companies, it was too late. On Thursday night, one day before Tristan's scheduled meeting, Bryce attended the governor's ball alone. He had declined all romantic entanglements during his rise to power, focusing solely on his mission. This single-mindedness created an aura of mystery that only enhanced his appeal. As expected, Vanessa was there, radiant in a designer gown, though her eyes betrayed her anxiety. Throughout the evening, she maneuvered closer to Bryce, finally intercepting him near the terrace doors. Bryce, she breathed, touching his arm lightly. Please, I've been trying to reach you. He regarded her with detached interest, as one might observe an insect. Ms. Reynolds, how unexpected. I've called you hundreds of times. Her blue eyes searched his face, lingering on his scars with fascination rather than revulsion now. We need to talk. Do we? What happened between us? I was wrong. Terribly wrong. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I've regretted it every day. Bryce glanced meaningfully at her engagement ring. Your fiancé might disagree. Tristan and I, it's complicated. It was never what I truly wanted. She stepped closer, her perfume enveloping him. You've changed. Become something extraordinary. Yes, Bryce agreed coldly. I have. Perhaps we could start again? Her hand rested on his chest, an intimate gesture captured by several nearby photographers. Dinner tomorrow night? For a moment, Bryce allowed himself to remember how deeply he had once loved this woman, how completely her betrayal had shattered him. I'm afraid my schedule is quite full, he said finally. I have a meeting with Mr. Wexler tomorrow that may run late. Vanessa paled. With Tristan? What? Business, Bryce replied vaguely. Though I understand congratulations are in order. The wedding is back on. No. I mean technically, but she composed herself. Bryce, whatever Tristan wants from you, I should warn you. Ms. Reynolds, Bryce interrupted. You had your opportunity to warn me 5 years ago, when I was in a hospital bed, and you decided I was too disfigured to love. He stepped away from her touch. You've made 218 attempts to contact me. I've ignored everyone. That should tell you everything you need to know about my interest in rekindling any relationship with you. As he walked away, Bryce finally felt a measure of the satisfaction he'd been working toward. But it was merely an appetizer. The main course would be served tomorrow when Tristan Wexler walked into his office, not knowing he was meeting with the man whose life he had tried to destroy. Chapter 7. Mask Removed. Tristan Wexler arrived at Phoenix Ventures precisely at 2 p.m., escorted by Miles to the executive conference room rather than Bryce's office. The subtle power move wasn't lost on Tristan, whose once impeccable appearance now showed signs of strain. His designer suit hung loosely on his frame, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. Mr. Harmon will join you shortly, Miles informed him, offering no refreshments. Bryce watched through the one-way glass, savoring the moment. He'd waited 5 years for this confrontation, meticulously constructing every detail. When he finally entered, Tristan rose quickly, extending his hand. Mr. Harmon, thank you for seeing me. Your reputation precedes you. Bryce ignored the outstretched hand. Does it? Which reputation would that be, Mr. Wexler? Confusion flickered across Tristan's features. Your business acumen, of course. Phoenix Ventures has made remarkable inroads in Lakeshire. Interesting. Bryce circled the table slowly. I wonder what else you know about me. Only what everyone knows. You're something of a mystery man. Tristan attempted a collegial smile. Though I understand you may have previously lived in Lakeshire. I did. Bryce sat at the head of the table. In fact, Mr. Wexler, we've met before. Have we? I don't recall. 5 years ago. You were visiting Vanessa Reynolds at Lakeshire Memorial Hospital. She had just returned my engagement ring. The blood drained from Tristan's face. Bryce, in the flesh, what's left of it? Bryce's smile never reached his eyes. Surprised I survived the helicopter crash you arranged? I don't know what you're talking about, Tristan stammered, half rising from his chair. Bryce slid a folder across the table. Antonio Diaz's signed confession detailing how you paid him to sabotage my helicopter. The police have a copy. So does my attorney. And if anything happens to me, the Lakeshire Financial Chronicle will run it as their cover story. Tristan sank back into his chair, his arrogance evaporating. What do you want? I want you to understand what's happening. Bryce pressed a button, and screens around the room illuminated with financial documents. Phoenix Ventures now controls 62% of Wexler Development's debt. We own the land surrounding your remaining projects. We've acquired your suppliers, your contractors, and your financing. You've been systematically destroying my company, Tristan whispered. I've been systematically destroying you, Bryce corrected. Your company is merely collateral damage. Is this about Vanessa? She chose me. After you try to have me killed, Bryce interrupted. But no, this isn't about Vanessa. She's irrelevant. The words struck deeper than Bryce expected. Vanessa had truly become irrelevant to him. A realization that confirmed his transformation was complete. Here's what happens next, Bryce continued, sliding another document across the table. You will sign Axiom Tower and all associated properties over to Phoenix Ventures for $1. That's a $400 million project, which you can't complete without my cooperation. Your alternative is bankruptcy and prison for attempted murder. Tristan's hands trembled as he processed his options. And if I sign, Phoenix absorbs Wexler Development. You retain a figurehead position with no actual authority. You will announce that your engagement to Vanessa Reynolds is over, and you will leave Lakeshire permanently within 30 days. My family has been here for generations. Your family is in Connecticut, where you'll be relocating. A modest position has been arranged with a property management firm. You'll earn enough to live, but never enough to rebuild. And if I refuse? Bryce leaned forward. Then I'll take everything anyway, but you'll do it from prison. Antonio Diaz is very eager to testify against the man who promised to protect him, but then abandoned him. Tristan stared at the document, defeat etched in every line of his face. You've thought of everything. I've had 5 years to plan this moment. Bryce placed a pen beside the contract. Your choice. As Tristan shakily signed each page, Bryce felt not the rush of victory he'd expected, but a cold, hollow satisfaction. This was merely the first phase of justice. One question, Tristan said, signing the final page. How did you do it? Rebuild yourself after. You made a fundamental miscalculation, Bryce replied, taking the signed contract. You believe my value was in my face, my construction company, my relationship with Vanessa. You thought by taking those, you'd destroy me. He stood, towering over his defeated enemy. But you merely stripped away everything that wasn't essential. What remained was something far more dangerous, a man with nothing to lose and everything to gain. As Tristan was escorted from the building, Bryce turned to Miles. Initiate Phase 2. Chapter 8. The Dismantling. News of Tristan and Vanessa's broken engagement dominated Lakeshire's social circles for precisely 2 days before being overshadowed by the announcement that Phoenix Ventures had acquired Wexler Development. The business community reeled from the sudden consolidation of power. Tristan departed quietly for Connecticut, his reputation in tatters after leaked documents suggested financial improprieties in his management of Axiom Tower. The leak, carefully orchestrated by Bryce, ensured that even if Tristan ever attempted to return to Lakeshire, no one would do business with him. With Tristan eliminated, Bryce turned his attention to Douglas Reynolds. The shipping magnate had once dismissed Bryce as unworthy of his daughter. Now, he faced the systematic dismantling of his empire. Reynolds Shipping lost the Eastport contract, Miles reported during their morning briefing. Their stock dropped 17% overnight. Increase our position, Bryce instructed. I want controlling interest by month's end. The call from Douglas Reynolds came 3 days later, requesting an urgent meeting. Bryce agreed to see him at the Phoenix Foundation Charity Gala, a public venue where Reynolds would be at a disadvantage. You're destroying my company, Reynolds accused, cornering Bryce on the balcony overlooking the gala. Why? Am I? Bryce sipped his whiskey. Perhaps you're simply facing market forces beyond your control. This is personal. It's about Vanessa. Mr. Reynolds, your daughter made her choice 5 years ago. She's irrelevant to my current business decisions. Then why target my shipping lines? Why block our port access? Bryce turned to face him fully. 5 years ago, your daughter told me I was too disfigured to love. She said no one would want me. You supported her decision, called it sensible in the circumstances. Reynolds had the decency to look uncomfortable. That was unfortunate, but unfortunate. Bryce's voice remained controlled, but eyes formed around each word. While I was at my lowest point, your family revealed exactly who they were. Now that I'm at my highest, I'm returning the favor. What do you want? Money? An apology? I want you to experience exactly what I did, watching helplessly as everything you've built is taken from you. Bryce smiled coldly. The difference is you have somewhere to fall. Your family money will cushion you. You'll regret this vindictiveness, Reynolds warned. Vanessa is devastated. She truly regrets what happened. She regrets backing the wrong horse, Bryce corrected. She chose Tristan thinking he was the path to greater wealth and status. Now she sees her mistake. He finished his drink. Give her a message from me, Mr. Reynolds. The next time she calls, I might actually answer, just to tell her that her father is about to lose control of Reynolds Shipping. The following week, Phoenix Ventures launched its most aggressive move yet, initiating a hostile takeover of Reynolds Shipping. The maneuver, combined with the strategic alliances Bryce had formed, left Douglas Reynolds no viable defense. Meanwhile, Vanessa grew increasingly desperate. Her calls to Bryce continued, now accompanied by handwritten letters and attempts to contact him through mutual acquaintances. When those failed, she resorted to appearing at Phoenix Foundation events, only to be politely but firmly turned away by security. Her final attempt came on the evening Phoenix Ventures announced its successful acquisition of Reynolds Shipping. Vanessa bypassed security by claiming a medical emergency, making it all the way to Bryce's private elevator before Miles intercepted her. He doesn't want to see you, Miles told her plainly. Please, she begged, her perfect composure cracking. 5 minutes. I need to explain. Explain what? Miles asked. How you abandoned him when he needed you most. Or how you're only interested now that he's powerful and wealthy. It's not like that. I made a terrible mistake. Tears streaked her makeup. I love him. No, Ms. Reynolds, you don't. You love what he represents. Redemption for your catastrophic miscalculation. Miles ushered her toward the exit. Mr. Harmon has moved on. I suggest you do the same. As security escorted Vanessa from the building, Bryce watched from his office window. The woman who had once been the center of his world now appeared small and insignificant. Are you sure about this next phase? Miles asked, joining him at the window. It crosses a line. They crossed the line first, Bryce replied. Is everything prepared? Miles nodded. The documents are ready. Once released, there's no going back. Bryce turned away from the window. Release them. The next morning, the Lakeshire Financial Chronicle ran an explosive expose revealing that the Reynolds family fortune, supposedly built on shipping innovation, had actually originated from Prohibition-era bootlegging and subsequent money laundering operations. The documentation, meticulously researched and verified, destroyed generations of carefully constructed social standing overnight. Douglas Reynolds resigned from all public positions and boards. The family's charitable foundation collapsed as donors distanced themselves. Their social invitations dried up. The Reynolds name, once synonymous with old money respectability, became tainted beyond repair. Bryce had taken everything from them: their businesses, their reputation, their social standing, just as they had taken everything from him 5 years ago. Yet as he reviewed the morning headlines, Bryce felt only emptiness. The revenge he had methodically constructed had been executed flawlessly. Why then did victory taste so hollow? Chapter 9. Ashes of Empire. 1 year after destroying the Reynolds-Wexler alliance, Bryce Harmon stood atop the completed Axiom Tower, renamed Phoenix Tower, surveying the city that had once rejected him and now lay at his feet. His revenge had been complete and devastating. Tristan lived in obscurity in Connecticut. Douglas Reynolds had retreated to a family property in Europe. Vanessa had finally stopped calling 6 months ago, after Bryce's attorney delivered cease and desist papers. Beautiful view, Miles commented, joining him on the helipad. Worth the wait. Bryce didn't answer immediately. The satisfaction he'd expected to feel remained elusive. It should be, but it isn't. They've lost everything that mattered to them, Bryce admitted. Yet I don't feel finished. Because revenge doesn't heal the original wound, came a voice from behind them. Vivian Mercer approached, elegant as always in her tailored suit. It just creates new ones. Philosophical today, Vivian? Bryce asked dryly. Practical. You've accomplished your goal. Destroyed your enemies. Now what? The question had been haunting Bryce for months. His single-minded focus on revenge had left no room for considering what might come after. The board meeting starts in 20 minutes, Miles reminded him. The acquisition of West Coast Technologies is on the agenda. As they descended to the executive floor, Bryce's assistant intercepted them with an urgent message. Mr. Harmon, there's a woman in reception insisting on seeing you. She says her name is Vanessa Reynolds. Bryce and Miles exchanged glances. Tell her I'm unavailable, Bryce instructed. I did, sir. She says she has information about Antonio Diaz that you need to hear. The name caught Bryce's attention. Antonio Diaz had disappeared 3 months ago, shortly before he was scheduled to testify in a newly opened investigation into the helicopter crash. Give me 5 minutes, Bryce told Miles, changing direction toward the reception area. Vanessa had aged visibly in the past year. Her designer clothes had been replaced by simpler attire, her perfect makeup by a more natural look. When she saw Bryce, she remained seated rather than rushing toward him as he had expected. You mentioned Diaz, Bryce said without preamble. What about him? He's dead, Vanessa stated flatly. Apparent suicide in Mexico. The police found a note confessing that he lied about Tristan's involvement in your accident. Bryce's expression didn't change. Why tell me this? Because despite everything, I don't want to see you destroy yourself. She met his gaze steadily. The investigation will clear Tristan. The evidence you've built your revenge on will collapse. I thought you should hear it from me. Why would you warn me? I've systematically destroyed your family. Because I loved you once, she answered simply. Genuinely loved you, before fear and shallow values made me betray that love. Nothing I can say will ever make what I did right. But this information, consider it my final attempt at amends. For the first time in years, Bryce looked at Vanessa, truly looked at her, and saw not the woman who had abandoned him, but a human being carrying her own scars, albeit invisible ones. What happens now? He asked. I'm leaving Lakeshire, starting over somewhere new. She stood, gathering her purse. I hope you find whatever peace you're looking for, Bryce. Revenge hasn't given it to you. That much is clear from your eyes. After she left, Bryce returned to his office where Miles waited anxiously. Diaz is dead, Bryce informed him. Supposedly left a suicide note clearing Tristan. Miles cursed. That complicates things. If the investigation clears Wexler. It won't, Bryce interrupted, accessing his secure server. Because Diaz didn't commit suicide. He was eliminated. By whom? Tristan Wexler. He may be in Connecticut, but he still has resources. Bryce pulled up surveillance photos taken in Mexico. These prove Wexler's connection to Diaz's death. I've had Tristan under surveillance since he left Lakeshire. Miles stared at him. You anticipated this move? I anticipated everything. Bryce forwarded the evidence to his attorneys. Tristan just upgraded his charges from attempted murder to actual murder. This ends today. Within hours, authorities in Connecticut arrested Tristan Wexler for orchestrating Antonio Diaz's murder. The evidence provided by Phoenix Ventures' private security firm was irrefutable. Tristan's desperate attempt to clear his name had instead sealed his fate. That evening, as Bryce sat alone in his penthouse, he finally opened the last voicemail Vanessa had left 6 months earlier. Her voice filled the room. Bryce, I know you'll never listen to this. I know you'll never forgive me, nor should you. What I did was unforgivable. I betrayed you when you needed me most because I was shallow and afraid. I thought appearance was everything. Now I've lost everything that actually matters, and I understand what you felt. I'm not asking for reconciliation or forgiveness. I just want you to know that I recognize the pain I caused, and I'll live with that regret for the rest of my life. Goodbye, Bryce. Bryce deleted the message and walked to the window. Below, Lakeshire continued its evening rhythm, oblivious to the machinations that had reshaped its power structure. He had achieved everything he set out to do. His enemies were destroyed. His power was secure. Yet as he stood alone at the pinnacle of his revenge, Bryce Harmon realized that the scars that truly defined him weren't the visible ones on his face, but the invisible ones on his soul. Those would never heal as long as he remained imprisoned by the past. True freedom, he understood now, wouldn't come from destroying his enemies. It would come from finally walking away from the ruins of what they had taken from him and building something entirely new, something they had never touched. Bryce picked up his phone and dialed Miles. "Change of plans," he said when his friend answered. "Cancel the board meeting tomorrow. We're restructuring Phoenix Ventures, expanding, relocating. Lakeshire holds nothing for me now." "Where to?" Bryce looked out at the city one last time. "Somewhere I've never been. Somewhere without ghosts." As he ended the call, Bryce felt a weight lifting. Not the triumphant exhilaration he had expected from his completed revenge, but something quieter and more profound. He had proven to himself, to Vanessa, to everyone who had discounted him, that he could not be destroyed. Now, it was time to prove something else.